Hi. It's happening.
I'm gonna try. I'm reminding myself to look at the camera and not at like you.
That's good. I know.
It's something to get used to. It's okay.
We're going to do our best shot.
Look at us adding video to the podcast.
This is challenging and stretching me to grow as a human.
Look, this is a thing for a lot of people is like tech stuff. I will say that I really, really don't consider myself tech savvy, but what I've had to learn over the last 5 years, I am like worlds away. If I had looked back at myself 5 years ago, I was like, look at this tech stuff you can do. I would be like, bullshit.
Right.
There's no way.
Bullshit.
And it's so frustrating, but here we are, we're doing it. So,
and it's just getting like more and more because it's like more and more our lives are on the internet, you know, and like we're having to figure out how to put our lives on the internet, which I was thinking a little too hard about the other day and I got real freaked out. And my kids were like, can we go on our iPad? And I'm like, no, there's like an entire world outside your iPad. You've got to figure out how to enjoy it. I was like, I need to chill out, but for real.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to be like that because I'm like that if I watch TV too much. I'm like, oh my God. What am I doing with my life? All I do is consume content and create content.
This is the Matrix. We are in it.
No.
And here we are recording stuff for online. I know. It is a balance. It's like a balance to strike for real.
Uh-huh. Anytime I disconnect, I'm like, ooh, so glad I did that. So glad. It's just I think you got to remind yourself to do it. So I love going places where I don't have service.
That's what I was about to say. Is sometimes like I shut my phone off. It's kind of intense how big of a reaction you're like, what if somebody needs to get a hold of me? And then just like thinking about when we were kids and my parents just would be like, come home when the sun goes down. And like, you know, just
Ben gets me to, when we go on date nights, to leave my phone at the house. He's like, you leave your phone at the house? And I'm like, yes, I do.
That's great.
But it's like how crazy that feels.
Especially because it's like such an important thing in our life, but it wasn't not too long ago. Not too long ago, it was not like a thing at all.
And it's funny because he'll get up to go to the bathroom and I'm like, what the fuck am I supposed to do now?
Yeah.
I guess I don't have my phone. And I'm like, I'm so lame. I'm so lame. You can sit at the table with your own thoughts and just be quiet.
Right. But it's a practice. I try to be really aware of when I'm in a setting like that and I'm just on my phone because I'm like, I feel awkward or weird in my setting. Like that's a very specific feeling that I try to like dig into and be like, I can entertain myself with my eyeballs at what I'm looking at in the world. Like
it's just like you just pick it up.
Yeah.
I had a friend in college who I actually love that she did this. I had a friend in college where when we would hang out at her place, she would make everybody stack their phones on top of each other in the center of the table. And she would be like, first person to reach for their phone, consequence. But like a fun consequence. I don't know. It was probably like has to chug a beer or something like that. But it just, I like loved it so much.
That's special. That is special.
It was nice. I like that. Maybe I should bring that back. I don't know.
I feel like that would work really well with your like gatherings. I feel like that would be fun. Yeah.
If you make it fun and not like I'm trying to tell you what to do. Right. Or like last person to reach for their phone like wins something.
Wins a prize. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I love that so much.
Yeah, it's good. So we want to talk about what to do when you're triggered.
Yeah, I think it's like this topic is, I don't know, I'm like really excited to talk about. We all know what it's like to be triggered and there's advice floating out there, but kind of like us talking about our systems of managing
different ways. Especially because you and I have such different ways of dealing with it.
Such different ways. And it's interesting because I'm practicing it with my girls, trying to teach them and help them. And I'm like learning because they're different than I am too. Like what works for them when they're feeling really kicked up and stuff. But yeah, being triggered, man, it is such like a visceral experience though in your body, right? There's a difference, I think, between being like offended in your brain and having like a fight or flight response in your body, right?
That's important, especially in today's world.
Yeah, because I think some people mistake being offended with being triggered. Like they just heard something they didn't like, you know, and they're like, I'm triggered. My definition of a trigger or being kicked up is when you're having a fight or flight response to something that you're engaging in.
I love your use of the words kicked up because it feels less all-consuming. Because also, for me, it's given me a nice way of talking about feeling triggered, not letting it be all that I'm experiencing, but also reminding myself that it's like a part of me. Because it allows me to be like, okay, something's being kicked up right now. It's obviously a part of me and my subconscious, my beliefs and experience, pain, just that word choice then makes me think, okay, so what part of me is being kicked up and why? And it's just, I don't know what it is about that word choice, but it really helps me not over-identify with what is going on, give myself some separateness, remind myself it's just a piece of me, and then getting like curious. I think maybe because it's the word choice is something that I learned from you as I've been practicing all this. So maybe it's just an association I've made, but I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah. And when you even think about the words like triggered, what does that make you think of? Like it makes you think of a gun. It makes me think of something that's like violent and aggressive. Kicked up makes me feel like there's something underneath that's coming to the surface, which I just like the association with the visual, like, the feelings there. It's not like as violent, I think, a word, as triggered, but I'm sure I'm going to use them interchangeably during this podcast. But yeah. And like, I don't know, the whole idea of the fight or flight response, right? That's just our brains have been wired to save our bodies, right? And so when we were cave people or whatever, that was there so that we didn't get eaten by saber-toothed tigers. But today, somebody's going to say something that reminds you of something awful that your mom said to you when you were a kid, and you have that same response. You need to fight a saber-toothed tiger. So that's like really intense, and we all have to deal with that all the time. It was helpful for me to learn that my brain isn't trying to make me suffer. It's actually wired to save my life. But our saber-toothed tigers today are so different.
Bosses.
Yes.
Friends, family.
Like partners.
Random people on the internet.
Yeah. Or your own self, like your own actions. Like I know that like I can do stuff that I'm like, I'm just like my mom or I'm just like this thing or whatever. And then you have this whole tumbling effect. But to really know that your body is trying to save you and trying to keep you alive when you're bringing more awareness into your day-to-day, especially around being kicked up or being triggered, having that inner voice that's saying, I recognize that I'm being kicked up right now. And like having that instead of having it completely take over, because that's the worst is when you go under, you completely go underwater with your trigger. And then that's when you're like, do the full freak out. Yeah. Like you jump out of cars. If you have like the flight response.
Like this is important. I think this is important to talk about because I think people have a tendency to do either a fight or a flight. I'm sure everybody does a little bit of both. But like we have very different tendencies in triggery situations. Like you have the flight response. And what does that look like?
Well, okay, jumping out of a car. I remember one time I had a big argument with my partner.
Did you actually jump out of a car?
I don't think it was moving very fast or it was like coming to a stop, but I was like fucking out of there. I was like so done with that conversation. And I like ran into the nearest building. I think it was a mall or a Barnes and Noble. I just like ran.
Oh my God, I love you so much. Oh my God. Wait, have you ever seen the movie Lady Bird? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Her and her mom are having like a conflict and they're like driving down a road. Her mom is like criticizing and like yelling at her and whatever about her life choices. And she just like opens the car and like
just like tumbles out of it.
And her mom's like, oh my God. And I just love that scene so much. First of all, that's what I'm imagining when you're like telling me this.
I wish I was that dramatic. Yes.
But I love that scene so much because I was just like, I just felt so relatable. I was like, doesn't every teenage girl want to do that like, with their mom?
Just throw your body out of the car. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, mine is like, I have so many memories of being in the middle of an argument or something happening and I just exit.
I'm sorry I'm laughing. I just like, it's out of like total love for you.
No, I know. And it's always like very Disney princess dramatic, like sobbing and running. I mean, running and jumping into a car and leaving and just like being so done with the situation. And it's totally like, this is killing me, like this argument or this conversation, and you need to just like exit. You need to remove yourself.
Gosh, that is so funny. And I also love that you ran into like a bookstore. All of it feels so on brand.
Yeah, doesn't it? Just like crying in a bookstore in the corner. Like that's
just like
on
I can't
brand.
be a part of this conversation. And then you're just like in the corner, I don't know, like reading a book. That's like how I imagine you.
I know. Oh man, so many of those. Driving away is also a good one because that feels a little bit more like, where am I going to go? One time, I'm like having so many memories come to me. One time I got really, really triggered and I was in Switzerland and I was in this like mountain, like in the Alps, and I started running away from the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was running away through this town in Switzerland thinking, I actually can't escape this place because I'm surrounded by mountains. I remember that was one of the only times in my life that I was claustrophobic because of the space I was in, like the city I was in, because I realized like if I needed to like run away, like officially run away, I couldn't because I'd have to cross a mountain.
Oh my gosh. This is so funny to me.
Lots of running away. But then the older I got, I tried to get, those are all like early 20s.
Yeah.
The running away more looks like shutting down or like leaving
Withdrawal.
and going into my room or saying, I can't have this conversation anymore. That is like the flight response. And honestly, actually, I remember getting really triggered in church back when I was having my whole unraveling. And I have very specific memories. And I've told you stories of these churches where there were these pastors that were really kind of like abusive and just like didn't feel cared for at all. And I remember getting triggered in church and like running out of the church because I was having a panic attack, like in church. Just
no.
Yeah.
No.
So
man,
running away.
That's your MO.
That's my MO. That's my protector response.
I'm actually trying to think if I've ever ran away.
Yeah.
Don't think that I ever have ran away physically. No. I mean, do you think we can guess at this point what my response is? It's not.
I'm like
it's not
on brand.
flee.
Yeah.
Mine is to fight. Is anyone surprised at this point? No, probably not. Mine is for sure to fight. Mine is like dig my heels in the ground and get like as big as humanly possible. Like puff up.
Yeah.
It's a thing. And when I was younger, what that looked like was like angry outbursts, yelling, saying really mean things to like get someone to stop, like to stop someone in their tracks with my words. Because that was another thing is I was like, if I can just like, yeah, it's a fight. All of my responses have always been fight. And it's so funny. We've talked about this a little bit, but Ben's is flight. And we trigger each other when I'll get big and then he'll withdraw and then that makes me bigger because I'm like,
he runs away farther.
And then he's like, but it's so nice because we know this about each other now. And actually the other night, well, I'll just back up because we were talking about, there was a time where we were in a lot of conflict because we were resolving something within our relationship. And you were a part of it. You were right in the middle.
I was right there.
And I had an important realization because you were trying to get me to calm down and like get grounded. And I was like, no, I'm good. I actually think I want to stay right where I am.
Yeah.
And we were
I was like, whoa. Yeah.
Because you are like, you don't want to feel like that.
I want to
get triggered
exit,
and you want to get out of being triggered as fast as possible.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And I get triggered and I'm like, I want to stay triggered until I feel safe. So it's like big time protector. Like, why would I want to like calm down? This is like going to keep me safe and protected. And so realizing that was so important because I had to know, and I do know that getting out of that state is where I'm going to make better decisions because I never make great decisions when I'm triggered. I will say like through practice, I can be triggered and have a little bit more clarity. You know what I mean? I think that comes from like practicing all of this.
Yeah.
But it's still not the best place to be. And reminding myself that I need to want to like get out of that was an important step for me.
Yeah.
For sure.
I remember when we were having that whole realization, I felt like, because again, we were so different and it was really so interesting. And I think the thing is, it's like when you're in your fight response, it is like a way to reclaim power. You're in a circumstance that is like sabotaging your safety, right? And you're wanting to reclaim a sense of safety. And you know you can do that by fighting and being powerful and big, and that actually that feels really safe. So it makes sense that you wouldn't want to get out of that because you feel safe in your power, fight, anger thing. And I think the flight response is when I'm triggered, I feel so unsafe, even in my flight response, that I want to move out of that so quick so I can feel more grounded. So it's like interesting that being triggered is two completely different like experiences for us, which is just like, I had no idea that was how it, you know, that it was so different for people. Yeah. I was and like, everybody wants to. Yeah. I didn't know it was different than me.
But I do want to get out of it. Like it is like not where I want to stay. So it was important for me to realize that because it's such a subtlety. Like I'm not sitting there when I'm like triggered thinking, wow, this feels amazing and I want to stay here forever. Sure. But it is like, I'm not always quick to get out of it because it feels like I'm like on full alert and ready for like whatever's dished out to me.
Right. Because you're like waiting for the saber-toothed tiger. Why would you? Why would you get out of that space?
Exactly. So for me, it's so different in that way. Yeah. It's so different.
Yeah.
And it's been so interesting to have a partner who is also different in that way because I think I've mostly had partners where it was like they kind of matched me. And that's also what I'm used to in my family. Most people, I think, not everyone in my family, but a lot of us have a get bigger flight response, and it's probably where I learned it. So it's been interesting to have a partner do that because what I've had to learn is that when we're experiencing conflict, when I get big, I'm creating essentially like an unsafe place for Ben to come meet me. And so knowing that makes it such that I want to like calm down because I know that I'm not creating, like that's the motivation for me to like calm down, especially with Ben, is that I want to create a place where he'll come be vulnerable and share and we can like move forward. And that has to be from like calming myself down. The motivation is external a little bit to want to get out of my trigger. It's much more like I want to get out of my trigger for the sake of like us rather than myself. Like I don't even necessarily want to, like if it was just me in my own little bubble, I probably would be like, I'll just stay like in this super high beta state and feel really like safe here.
Right.
So I think that's also interesting because if you want to like move forward with the people that is in the situation with you, that's like has to be step number one.
Yeah, you got to come to that neutral place. And that's the thing that makes me like, okay, I got to get out of this because it's not going to be helpful because I know I'm going to just create withdrawal in Ben. Yes. I love talking about this because there's like so many elements to it and it's so nuanced. We all experience it. And I think it's just an area to shed more light and bring more understanding and clarity to.
And stories, because I'm realizing like the more we talk about this, the more I realize how different everybody is in this way. Really, and that's part of this process is like getting curious about your own ways that you experience trigger. What do you tend to do? What are your patterns? What are your default behaviors? What is like the consequence of what you do when you're triggered? Like for me, it's doing something I regret. Like that is always the consequence of acting in like a super triggered state is I'll say something I don't mean. And honestly, I don't really do that anymore, but I definitely did in my 20s. Like in my early 20s, I would just do things that wasn't in alignment with what I wanted to be in the world. So for me, it was like a huge process of reminding myself, look, if you go down this triggered path, you're going to end up doing something you regret. And you know how shitty that makes you feel. Because then I just beat myself up for like, I was going to say weeks and then I was like years.
Forever.
Because you know when you like, you like have those moments where you think about something you did that's super cringy and you're just like, oh God.
Definitely.
Like those haunt me forever.
Yeah. That's interesting to hear you say the biggest consequence for you engaging in that fight response. And I think the consequence for me really engaging in a big way with the flight response is making conclusions. Like while I'm running away, I will be making a bunch of conclusions or decisions, definitions about the situation, the person, like that person is not safe. This always happens. This is going to keep happening. I'm not going to be okay. And there are these really damaging belief systems that solidify, which I feel like I've read about when you experience trauma, how isn't it like your eyes like freeze and it actually freezes in your brain, this thing that has happened to you. But yeah, I think that there's just like a lot of conclusions that I make. And you have to try to remember, okay, I got to get out of this so I can create a neutral environment so that my partner can engage with me and feel safe. I have to like remember that it's really this whole idea of this person isn't intending me harm. If it's in relationship or with somebody that I love and I know. Now, if it's like with some like whatever, I'm running away because some crazy person's trying to assault me. Like, of course I'm not like, I'll make all the conclusions I want about that. Or you have an abusive
person in your life, but like, let's just assume most people in our life. Not usually meaning us harm.
Right. Yeah. And I lost my train of thought.
Oh, and I can just add to this and see if it helps because this is one of my favorite things that you've taught me or brought into my life was the question of, does this person mean me harm? I know you ask that when you're triggered by, especially like a romantic partner. And like always, if you're in a relationship with somebody who's not abusive, we're going to stop giving caveats. But always the answer when I'm like, does this person mean me harm is almost always no.
Right.
No, they don't mean me harm. They touched on something. They touched on an insecurity. They're hungry or tired even, and they're struggling themselves to like keep their composure. So the idea of asking, does this person actually mean me harm? Because usually you'll get a quick no. And then it gives you like almost immediate insight.
Yes. Yeah.
At least in my experience, you're like, right, okay. This person is struggling right now or having a hard time or something is really going on with them and I actually don't know what it is.
Right. Or there's like miscommunication, something I'm misinterpreting here in a big way. That's usually like a big one for me is that I will interpret somebody's behavior. I will transfer myself onto that person. This is like emotional transference is like a big thing and a lot of times can result in all that miscommunication. But somebody will say or do something to me and I immediately transfer myself onto that action. Like if I did or said that thing to somebody, it would have come from a malicious place, right? And so then I assume that they're trying to hurt me and this all happens in like a fraction of a second. Then I make these like conclusions.
Oh, that's a fun one where you're like, I would never do something
I would never
like that.
say
How
that to somebody.
Dare they? And then you're just like so triggered because of it. Yeah. Ooh, that's a big one for me too.
That's a big one. And I have to be like, the intentions I would put behind those words or that action is probably different than what this person is meaning. Yeah. And so it's that, okay, is this person meaning me harm? No, I don't believe they are. Okay. So then that gives you like this breath, this space to then start being like, okay, there's something here I'm not seeing. There's some miscommunication that I'm going to get to work through this. And then the other thing I do for sure is I like catastrophize in my being kicked up. If I get triggered, it could be something like relatively small. I'm like, it's the end. This relationship is over. Everything is falling apart. My life is meaningless. Like it can go there so fast. And that's been something I've really had to learn to be like, okay, we're not going to catastrophize. That is like not a quality I want to engage in. But that is something that people do often because it can just snowball.
Right.
And actually, that's like something I've been working with my daughters a lot with because they'll hear the wind outside and then they're like crying and coming out to me saying Pennywise is in our house. And I'm like,
what's Pennywise?
Is that clown, that creepy clown. I guess like them and all their friends from It. Isn't it the clown from It?
No.
Yeah, them and all their friends they've never obviously ever even been near seeing that movie. But I think it's like, this is what happens.
They like know about it?
They know about it and it scares them, but they also want to like talk about it with their friends, right? Or they're trying to make sense of it because it's scary. But anyway, that was just a silly example of my girls catastrophizing. And I have to like bring them back to being like, okay, I was like, has any monster, clown, or person ever broken and hurt you in the middle of the night? And they're like, no. And I was like, so let's come back to like what we know is real. And what we know is real is that you're safe here. You're safe in your home. And maybe there's a sound you don't know what it is. And it's this question mark that you're not sure what that sound was. But what's more real is that it's probably a neighbor or something like that. And it's probably not Pennywise.
Pennywise.
Yeah, but it's like we do that. We have very like childlike, very instinctual patterns that we just click through. I'm interested in hearing what being kicked up feels like in your body. I know you say you like puff up, and that's like really good imagery. But like, what do you experience in your body when you're real kicked up?
Yeah. Wait, there was something I wanted to say about the other thing though.
The catastrophizing?
Well, yeah. Okay, real quick before I do it, how it feels in my body, because I was thinking about this. One thing that like really helped me was I had this mentor once, and she worked with entrepreneurs. And then like a side thing was female entrepreneurs. One of her things is people who struggle with anxiety, which has like been my thing for a while, although like not anymore. But one thing that she asked me that was honestly life-changing was she was like, when you go to your deepest, darkest place, when you are like in like a ball on the ground, what are the things that you tell yourself? Because, and she like really made me dig into it, and she made me say them out loud, which I had never said out loud before that moment. And it was an incredibly powerful experience. I mean, like, first of all, instant tears.
Sure, of course.
Because it's like, it's the story you tell when you're in your darkest place. And the power in saying it out loud was not only just like a big ball of like empathy for myself, because saying it to this other person, I mean, she immediately was like, wow, that's really fucking mean.
Yeah.
You know, because it was like so like harmful to me.
Yeah.
And she just was like, I mean, I could say the thing where like, you would never say that to someone else. I know you know that. Like, you would never say those things to someone else. And the other thing that was powerful about saying it out loud is like, again, we talk about this a lot, is like bringing it into the light. It was just like, for the first time in my life, I like looked at it because I didn't think of it. It was so automatic where you go in your mind when you're feeling like that. And it's such an autopilot thing that you don't realize is an autopilot thing until you start like saying it out loud to someone safe. Because when you say it out loud to someone safe, they're like, whoa, you know, she was just like, Sarah, one, you would never say it to someone. Two, like, you know, that's not true. Because that's the other thing is it's generally like not true. I've asked this question of a few people and it's always fucking awful, scary, so sad. And you're just like, and so not true.
Yeah.
And when they say it out loud, I'm like, you know, that's not true, right? And they're like, yeah, you have like a knowing that it's not true.
Yeah. When
you hear it said out loud, but like in the like dark place in your mind, when you're in like a bad triggery spot, you can feel like it's real.
Yeah.
And so I think that asking yourself, what are the things, because what happened for me in that moment also is when I got triggered, I noticed that so many of my thoughts were on autopilot. It was like, boom, I'm triggered. And then my brain was like, here's the story, here's the story, here's the story, here's the story. And it was just like autopilot, like fucking repetitive thoughts of just shit that I've been like talking to myself for decades. And then what that gave me the power to do is like see that in those triggered moments where I would get triggered and I would be like, oh shit, those thoughts are here. And they're so automatic. It's incredible to me. And then that allowed me to like not take them on
you like
as like
separated
truth
yourself from them.
Yeah, because I was able to see it like just like happening. And also like you could write them in a journal even. It's like pulling them out when you're not in it and knowing what they are. Because then when you get super triggered, you're like, oh, here they are again.
Here they
like
are.
Fucking clockwork.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it literally was like life-changing to do that. So I don't know if you have someone safe in your life to do that with. It's huge. And then when you're especially like, I don't know, Ben and I were just having a conversation about this the other night because I was asking him about his because I could tell there was a pattern. And he was like, one, when he heard mine, he was like, wow, that's not true. And then when I heard his, I'm like, but now you hear yours. Like I said them back to him and he was like, yeah, I know that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm talking to like vaguely. I can like say mine. It just feels like
I don't feel like you have to. I actually don't.
Okay.
I don't think you should.
I was like, do I have to?
No,
okay.
You do not.
Because it's like the worst things I say to myself when
you can keep those. You can keep those in your safe relationships. I was actually listening to you talk and being like, I'm glad she's not.
Okay,
like,
I was like, am I
there.
supposed to do that? Okay, no. Okay. I don't know. That was so fucking powerful for me. I don't know. There's something to be said for taking those thoughts and bringing them into the light and realizing like, man, this isn't real. This is just like where my brain goes when I'm triggered. Anyway, that was a really long tangent. I don't know if we can go into body, but I'm sure you have thoughts.
We'll get there. This is such a good thing to bring up because when you're in that most triggered place and you have that deep underlying narrative, this is like your pain, right? It's what it is. It's like the core pain. A lot of like the core pain stuff is unlovable. Or unworthy. Yeah. Those are some of the very core, when you can kind of distill it all the way down to I am not deserving of love and I'm not worthy of anything good, right? I get chills just thinking about it.
I know.
It's just all of us humans can identify with that. And we work really hard, right? All of our managers, all of our protectors work really hard to be like, nope, we're not going to go there. We're going to avoid that. But then when you're in the full triggered place and everything's all kicked up and that narrative, that big scary narrative is out there, when you can get to know that, like what you did, recognize it, say it out loud. And when you say it out loud, a lot of times, I know I've like said it out loud to therapists or whatever, and I'm just like hearing myself talk and I'm like, that is ridiculous. Like what I'm saying is kind of ridiculous. Yeah. Like it's like, I'm going to be alone forever in torment, stuff like that. And it's just kind of like, that doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. But when you see that and when you understand what that core narrative is, you can start uncovering your deepest wounds. That is the roadmap that holds what your deepest wounds are. And then you can start going through the whole process that I guess we lay out in Master Your Mindset of how to start integrating and healing and meeting your needs and all those things. But they're all right there. You've got that underlying current that's there all the time. And then it'll pop up. And when you can get familiar with that, you really can start. And it doesn't mean like it goes away, but it means when it's there, you recognize it. You have like a dialogue with it. You have an understanding. You're like, yes, I see you. I know this is where we go. I'm not going to make decisions based off of this. I'm not making conclusions based off of this. And I'm really going to just care for myself and nurture myself right now.
It is a practice and it does get easier because when I experience that place now, I'm not like in it anymore. I'm more like, oh, there are those thoughts. It's just like not a place I go anymore, really. Like you can get to a place where you're like, oh, it's like here, that's super automatic. And I'm just not really going to go there because I've now know that those things aren't true.
Yeah. You don't let them take over because that's the thing. It's like when those things take over, then you are fighting and yelling at people that you love, or I'm running out of buildings and cars.
Flopping out of cars.
It's just rolling out of cars.
This is like always going to be my image of you running away is the ladybird one.
I love that. Right. Yeah.
All right.
And
body.
Yes. Okay. How does being triggered and kicked up feel in your body?
I mean, it's like my heart rate is elevated for sure.
Yes.
It's interesting. I feel really focused. I feel like I have like laser sharp focus. And I know it to be high beta from reading Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza, which is like one of our favorite books. Because the way in which he describes the high beta state, I'm like, oh, that is not only like how I feel when I feel triggered, but it's also how I feel when I get myself to like a high beta state. I don't really, that's like the word I use now.
Yeah.
Because I know exactly what it feels like when I want to like get shit done. It's why I enjoyed being an event planner. Like my favorite part about being an event planner was like the controlled chaos of a really complex event in it, where I had to like manage so many moving parts. And I would just be like, my blood pressure was surely up. I felt incredibly focused. I mean, I felt like I could run like a half marathon. And sometimes during an event, I would like track it. I would like literally like the amount of steps would be like equivalent to that. It's like a drip of adrenaline, basically, like an adrenaline drip.
Yeah.
And then what would happen after an event when I would be like in high beta for that many hours is the next day I would have this massive come down where I would feel like so drained, so tired, and so sad. Like I would just be like so
you're like serotonin
sad.
Drop. Yeah.
Yeah, I like probably like depleted my brain of like serotonin and dopamine because I was just like giving like myself rushes of it. So triggered for me feels the same way. And I think that's why it doesn't feel like something I want to get out of too quickly because I feel super focused. It's like a laser focus and a high energy. That's how it feels.
Yeah. That's so wild.
Yeah. And like so much energy. It's like all my energy reserves are just like, here, what do you need all this energy for? Do you want to go like do sprints? Yeah. I think that's why I like to, whenever I'm like, that's how I always like dealt with things in life is like, God, I gotta move my body.
Yeah, totally. I feel like that makes so much sense. You're like Iron Man or like a superhero with all this
like it's like I could probably like lift a car off of someone.
Right.
Like it's like
totally.
It's like feels like that. It's like drugs. It's like being on like
it's like drugs,
cocaine
it's like
or
PCP.
something. It's like being on cocaine or something. You're just like that's
so
how
funny.
it feels.
Okay, so what's interesting is hearing
you my crazy brain.
Well, hearing you talk about that, I identify with that, and it's what I call my mama bear mode.
Oh, okay.
Okay, right? If anything at all I perceive as a threat to my children, and it's so funny because like, you know me, and I feel like I'm a pretty non-violent person, non-aggressive person. And that was like actually a huge value of mine, even in my teenage years and stuff like that I was like, nonviolence. And then like,
wait, real quick, you got to say something about nonviolence because you use nonviolence in a way that I think, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to stop your train of thought. Real quick, nonviolence, you mean like non-confrontational because violence is a really loaded word, not like,
well, I mean,
we talk about this in Master Your Mindset. We like define it because it's not like nonviolence, like physical violence. Sorry.
And this was like thoughts I was workshopping in my like early 20s, but it even like extrapolated to like my belief systems around what I support in the world, even like that I'm not going to like support things that engage in violence. And that also means like physical violence or harming people. Right. So it was like a big umbrella term, but yeah, I guess what it meant, like how it showed up in my life was I'm not going to argue and engage in confrontation with people. And I'm going to choose to like not, because I wasn't like running around like punching people.
Right. I just like when you say nonviolence, it's like a step further than what people think. You're like, obvious, don't punch people. Right. But when Emily says nonviolence, because I asked you this one day, I was like, what are you like? Yeah. Nonviolence, you mean like not reacting even. Yeah. Like not being reactive.
Even
like you
like
mean a
emotional, verbal, like, yeah. So.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Mama bear mode. So then I'm like this like Zen, whatever bullshit. And then I have my Evie and I realized that if anybody ever tried to hurt her, I would kill them with my bare hands. Yeah. Like not a second thought. And it was this whole other part of me that opened up because like I didn't have that feeling in regards to anything else. But then my children, I was just like, I would be violent. Like if that's what it took to take care of my child. And that has never obviously been like really engaged. Nobody's ever tried to like hurt my children. Right.
But,
right. It's like a whole side of you got unlocked though.
It did. It was like this whole other part of me that is much more of the fight. Like I would fight there. I'm not going to run away. I'm going to fight to the death for sure. Definitely. Yeah. So that part of me has gotten kicked up. Like if there were instances in which maybe like I wasn't agreeing with what somebody was saying about my child or about how I was raising my child or belief systems, that would get kicked up and I would go fight. I would like go fight and I'd be like, nope, that's not how it works. That's something actually, and every mom I think can really identify with that feeling of like being criticized for how you're parenting or the kind of mom you are, man, you just go right to fight. It doesn't matter how nonviolent, quote unquote,
when I have kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, it's like a whole thing. And then like, I mean, cause I've dealt with different kids like bullying and things like that. And then experiencing like being angry at a small child, like at another small child. I'm like, I'm angry at this little jerk over here. And he's like 8.
That's so funny.
I'm just like, I need to chill out. So, okay. I guess I was just saying, like, I was identifying with some of what you were saying, this high beta focus, powerful, going to take charge of the situation.
Yeah.
Really, I feel that in some areas for sure.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And it does feel really good. Like I do. I feel like I could pick a car up. I feel like I could
it feels great.
Yeah.
That's the problem with
I feel like a superhero.
Like, why would I want to get out of this trigger? I have all my resources like right at the top.
Yeah.
It's like everything is at the surface. It's like my body's like, whoop, here's all your serotonin and your dopamine and your adrenaline and your epinephrine. And here you go. It's right here, ready for you to use.
Yes.
And I'm like, thank you. I'll have some of that adrenaline. I'm going to use that for a little bit until I like pass out because I'm so tired. And then I'll take some of that. And you're just like, why would you want to leave that?
Right. And especially
that's like what the last few years has been.
Right. And now, man, I feel like talking about this, I'm like having so much empathy. I feel like I'm understanding more of that. Like, why would you want to leave that? Because now that I'm associating it with this feeling that I have this mama bear mode, if I was perceiving a threat that was like coming against my children, nobody could talk me out of that mode. Not a single person.
Like, I'm fine. I'm fine right here.
I'd be like, I'd start fighting them. I'd be like, fuck all the way off.
Emily, when you were like, okay, so what can you do to get grounded? I mean, in my mind, I was like, oh, shut the fuck up. Like, you know?
And I guess I really am identifying with like why that makes so much sense now.
Because of like how you are. Like I never really like get that way towards you. You know what I mean? Because you're like disarming in the way that you are for me. Mm-hmm. But like I was like, like, but definitely like almost like turned it on you.
Yeah.
You know? Just like
that's so
like, Emily's not the one that should be on the receiving end of this. But I'm sure other people relate to this.
Yeah.
Because it's like you hear this and you hear about being triggered. And then you're like, but what if I don't want to get out of that?
Right. Well, and even the whole like having somebody tell you to calm down or to
that's
like
why it's so
take
triggering.
a chill
You're
pill.
Like, no, my protectors are out for a reason and they're here to keep me safe. So telling me to chill, that's like, it makes sense that that's like, it's so enraging. Not helpful.
Yeah.
It's enraging.
Actually, you know, another time that I go into fight is if I ever get shushed.
Oh, I've seen that. I've shushed you.
You shushed me in the movie theater and I was like,
and I like, and honestly though, because you never get into fight, when you like got all sassy with me in the movie theater about shushing you, I like fucking loved it. I was like, yeah.
It's like, that is like one thing
what's wrong with me?
That guarantees like a fight response. Yeah. But my fight response is just like angry eyeballs. Like it's not like,
you were like, did you just, I was like, don't shush me.
Shush me. And then usually I'm just like louder then, you know? I was like, you want me to be quiet?
And then you immediately started loud talking. You were like, oh, what? You're going to shush me?
Yeah.
I can talk. It's the previews. Previews are meant for talking. And I was like,
oh, I did do that. I was so sassy.
You were so sassy. And I just like, but I like loved it. I was like, yeah.
Yeah, that is one thing that'll be like,
again.
no, fuck you. Don't shush me. I'm not a fucking child.
You started loud talking and I was like, oh, wow.
Rebellious loud talking. Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah. That makes me angry. That'll get me into fight for sure.
Wait, so what does it feel like in your body then?
Okay.
When you're triggered? Because it's probably different.
Yeah. So I experienced obviously like elevated heart rate. My hands will go ice cold, like my extremities, because like all the blood like rushes to my organs. Like, okay, we're dying. Let's preserve our organs. So my hands will go numb. My face, like my lips can go numb. Yeah, it's like real wild.
Wait,
like,
that's so weird.
Yeah.
It's weird because I feel like my like legs are ready to run and move and stuff. So it's like, I'm just like having a question. Is our bodies redirecting blood flow in different ways?
I think so. I feel like that would make sense. Like if you were in a fight,
hot. I get
hot. Freezing cold.
You get like cold. Mm-hmm. That's so
because
weird.
There is like the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Mm-hmm. Technically, there's like 4, right?
Right.
So maybe that's more of like a freeze thing. Especially if I'm triggered by something like it's outside of my vicinity, like it's happening on the phone or on something else where it's not like a conversation with somebody. If I'm triggered in a conversation with somebody, it's flight. Actually, I bet that I probably don't experience that numbing, freezing feeling when I'm actually like running away from a conversation.
Running. Yeah.
Right. So maybe that's like the freeze and the flight. Yeah. I'll get cold, shivery, high heart rate, and then just like a lot of really like manic thought processes, right? All that catastrophizing and stuff.
I just
like
love the body so much.
It's wild.
Like, how cool.
Yeah.
What an awesome thing.
And this is like the big thing I want to talk about now that we've really like dug into identifying what being kicked up and triggered is, or what it can look like in somebody's body. It's like,
I just want to add one thing.
Yes.
Because you mentioned the manic thoughts, and it made me realize we didn't talk about our thought processes. Because I have a theory that everyone's thoughts in those states, no matter what they are pretty automatic and pretty repetitive.
Yeah, I agree.
Because mine get it's like autopilot. And it's those stories that I told you about. But
definitely,
if I'm only like slightly triggered, those big, deep, dark ones don't come up. But I will say that I have noticed that my thoughts, when I'm triggered, they're very repetitive.
Yeah.
And manic.
Yeah. I feel like we've had lots of conversations where I would be like, hey, I'm hearing you say this. Like, I've heard you say this thing repeatedly in conversations, right? And I feel like I remember having conversations with you where we were touching on, whoa, these like repetitive thoughts that keep happening.
Oh my gosh. Yes, this is a good example because one that we identified together, because I would call you when I was like super triggered and be like, is the idea that I always felt like I had to make a decision. Like I was like, I'm triggered. Sometimes it's like, this always happens. You know what I mean? All of a sudden you pull to the surface all the other times where you felt like this. And so therefore you're in that moment, like this always happens. This is a pattern. This is something where I'm stuck, especially in romantic relationships. And then immediately I would go into, now I have to make a decision.
Right.
About this. And you would be like, you don't have to make a decision right now.
Don't
in fact,
have to decide.
Probably the worst time to make a decision.
Yes.
And I needed that reminder.
Right.
One of my automatic triggered thoughts was like, I have to make a decision to fix this problem right fucking now.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've had conversations with Ben too. Like, it would be like the same thing. I'm just saying the same thing I told to Sarah, but like, you don't have to make any decisions right now. Because for me, I think people have said that to me. My sister, Kayla, she's actually brilliant at managing triggers and stuff like that. And she was the one that really like drove that home, I think, in me of like, you don't have to do anything right now, anything except take care of yourself. And it was like so relieving to me because, and it makes sense that you're like, I'm in pain. I feel unsafe. I need to make a decision so that I don't ever feel like this again.
Yes.
And it makes sense you go there. Yeah. But having that reminder of like, I know you feel that pressure, but you don't have to. You don't have to make a decision today. You don't even have to make a decision this week. You can just sit with yourself and try to soothe yourself and try to manage what's going on. And that there's a future version of you. Another thought I love is like, I can trust a future version of me is going to be able to figure this out.
Yeah.
Like I might not be able to figure this out right now because I'm freaking out, but there's a future version of me that's way more calm and centered who's going to like make better decisions. And I'm trusting in her, you know? So I think that that's a really good point.
It's so important. Practicing self-awareness while you're triggered is fucking hard. It's real hard. Such a game changer.
I mean,
really hard.
It is so rich with all of your pain. It is a nucleus, like it is a hub of all the things that make you tick and that are subconsciously kind of controlling the narrative. That's why I love the
phrase that triggers are your teachers. Like it's such a good, simple reminder that they really are because you will learn the most from your triggers. Yes. Like quickly. And that's the other thing that I remind myself is like when I experience a big trigger, I always remind myself now, I'm like, this is here for a reason. And it's an opportunity to learn something and heal something ultimately. And that is also relieving to me. It makes it feel purposeful rather than just like I'm flailing around as like this messy ass human.
That is
which is also true. Yes. But it makes it feel like a purposeful and it makes it feel like purposeful. And if I actually uncover what's underneath it, I will move forward rather than having it always happen to me.
That is such a big point because I think that was a huge turning point for me when I really understood that my triggers were my teachers. I wasn't so devastated. Yes. I wasn't so victimized and devastated by those circumstances because I think before I really like wrapped my head around the concept of I'm going to learn and grow because of this, and I have what it takes to learn and grow because of this, I just felt like I'm suffering. Life is bringing me pain and I'm just suffering, and this is just going to keep happening, and I have no control. I have no power here. And changing that narrative to, I'm going to be better because of this. Ultimately, I'm going to be a better person, and I'm going to be more realized as the type of person I want to show up in the world because I'm going to learn from this trigger. And someday this isn't going to trigger me as much as it's triggering me right now.
Totally.
Yeah, that's huge.
And I really love the idea of, and I can't remember where I heard it first, probably Esther Perel, but I really love the idea and the reminder that your core humans, usually a romantic partner and like a best friend, allowing those people to like know your triggers is so important. And I will say, I want to just add, it doesn't mean that they need to avoid them, because that's how I think a lot of people operate when they don't have this understanding. It's how I operated actually, is when you don't have all of this like understanding, what a lot of people do is someone's trigger, but then you just like avoid it altogether.
Right.
And I actually think that that's not helpful, because you're missing out on a really important opportunity to grow and to heal a wound that will then be less of a thing. And so when your people know your triggers or the stories that you tell yourself, it's so helpful, because Ben does it and you do it too, where when I'm upset, you'll be like, this makes sense. This is touching on like that thing that is a recurring thought process for you or pain for you. Yeah. And it's just like, it's so helpful to have those people in your life, like know those things about you.
It's so good. Because when you're in a triggered state, right, you get that laser focus, and it's hard to make all the connections. You know what I mean? When you're in it, and having somebody that knows your story and can see the entire plot arc, and they can be like, oh, this makes sense because it connects to this and it connects to that, because they can do that because they're not themselves triggered. And that is so valuable. And I actually, like, years ago, I was writing a book for somebody. I was ghostwriting a book for somebody. We were getting close to like the end of the book, and this person telling me their story. And I was really trying to I was like, what's the theme here? What's the thread? Because this was like early on in my journey of really getting interested in the human experience and being aware of it and aware of like patterns and loops. I remember I sat down and I ended up writing 16 little index cards of these bullet points. And I realized I had identified a loop that this person was repeating. And they had done 3 full cycles, and they were on their 4th cycle of the same loop.
Oh, whoa.
But I'm doing this for the story's sake. Like, I'm going to write this like great book or whatever. And I remember having a meeting with this person, and I sat down and I was like, I think I found the thread that strings the story together.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, I lay out
and the person's like,
I lay out these cards, and I remember his face, like all the blood drained from his face. And he just like, and to this day, he'll say to me that moment, his eyes opened to his life, and he completely like changed the narrative. He's like, I refuse to participate in this loop any longer. And he says, he's like, I have those cards in my nightstand and they're there. And I'm like approaching it like, I'm just like trying to write this book. But what I uncovered in that experience was how powerful this idea of loops and patterns, and how this man like recognizing that and becoming aware of that really changed his life.
Yeah, I've never heard this story before, and I like knew I was like, oh my gosh, can you imagine?
I didn't know what I was doing at the time. Bless his heart, though, seriously, because having somebody do that, I can't imagine having somebody sit down and just lay, like, here's your whole life and here's all your patterns, and you're on like step 3 of your 4th cycle. And so the next thing, if you're going to keep going down this road, is XYZ, you know?
and they're probably just like, oh, fuck.
Right.
And it's interesting that he wanted to pull out of it. He was like, oh, no. I don't want to be a part of this.
Because it was
narrative.
A destructive cycle. It was like causing him a lot of pain, right? I don't think was like in alignment with what he was wanting to cultivate. And so anyway, but that's all to say, like having somebody who can see your story and like maybe see those patterns is so valuable. And to talk to them about those things and to talk to them about your triggers and your whatever, it can be so valuable for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I just want to say that this is like one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast, was because I want more people to seek out friendships like this. because I don't think you do this all by yourself. And this has been a big thing for Ben because he thinks he goes withdrawal. He doesn't talk for like hours and he's like, I'm going to just like fix everything in my brain like this. And I'm just like, I do not think that that's how that happens. Like, I'm like, I don't think that we can learn as much about ourselves on our own. Like, we have to have the people who see, because we all have blind spots.
Yes. And people see
like
different perspectives.
We have blind spots.
Yeah.
And you need these people and actively seeking out friends who are like, want to have these conversations to see your blind spots. Like, it's just, I just want it for everyone. That's what I want.
It's true.
Because I didn't have it until you.
Yeah.
So I just flailed about in my 20s.
Surviving.
Just surviving, moving from one trigger to another, leaving like a wake of triggery destruction.
Oh, man.
Seriously.
Yeah.
It's like it's so messy. Yeah. I mean, it's still messy, but I feel like I have a little bit, just like a tiny bit more awareness. Mm-hmm. But so much of it came from you.
Yeah.
And our friendship.
Yes. I feel like when I start feeling really frayed out and lost in those like triggery thoughts or that narrative, and I know I've talked to you before where I'm like, tell me what has happened. What is real? It's almost like what I'm like, can you tell me what has happened to me? What's going on? Mm-hmm. But yeah, that is so important. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite things about doing this podcast and Master Your Mindset is talking with people as they like uncover these things about themselves. Cause it's like it's the most interesting thing to me.
Me too.
Obviously. That's why we're here.
Obviously.
Like, this is the most interesting stuff to me. And I love it with everyone. Like, most people, once I get to know them a little bit more and know these things about them, my empathy for them just like explodes. Cause I'm like, oh man, everybody's gone through some shit.
So much. You've done so much. Yeah.
You're doing great.
Yeah. So, okay. I feel like I would like to touch on a little bit of tools to navigate triggers. Now that we've like really super identified all the things, the tools that you implement. And we've talked about some of them, like saying this person doesn't mean me harm. I don't have to make decisions right now. Becoming really aware of that underlying narrative that's there. The story that you're telling yourself, right? So those are a lot of
That's a good one that Ben and I say to each other often when we see the other person's triggered is, and Ben's better at it than me actually, he'll look at me and go, what is the story you're telling yourself right now?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, fuck. Because then I like say it out loud and I'm like,
that's not real. It's not true.
That's not real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or it gives him an opportunity to be like, that's not real, because it's usually about like something he's doing. He's like, this is what's actually happening. And it gives him a chance to like fill in the blank around his intentions. Because that's the other thing is I'll put intentions where I'm like, oh my God, how like dare he? And he's like, or you missed the fact that I was juggling 15 things. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anyway. Yes. So that's another one. What's the story you're telling yourself?
Yes. And so a lot I think of tools around navigating being kicked up is, I think, a huge in part, like we're talking, like this is all mental stuff, which I think is a couple steps down the road. Ultimately, though, that is, I think, where you do a lot of the learning and growing. But for me and for most people, I think it's just nervous system regulation, right? Your nervous system is like on high alert, and it's about getting your brain and your body back to a place where it feels safe. And so tools like deep breathing, box breathing, what that does is it tells your body, no, we're actually safe because I can breathe slowly. Because a lot of times when you're triggered, you're breathing really rapidly. Your heart's beating rapidly and you're breathing really rapidly because you're ready to fight or run or do whatever. You can hack that by making yourself breathe slowly. Because if you were really experiencing a threat, if there really was a saber-toothed tiger, you would never breathe slowly. You would never do that. You know what I mean? So it's a way to like hack your body and hack the system that's in play to keep you safe, to tell your body, no, we actually are safe. And I'm going to breathe really slowly. And that's going to slow my heart rate down. And immediately you start coming down if you can do that.
Box breathing is breathing in for 4, holding for 4, out for 4, and holding for 4.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
I mean, that and just slowing your breathing down in general. It also is something that I don't know if you've noticed this, but when I do it, when I'm triggered, it actually feels really fucking good. Like it feels better almost.
Yeah.
I mean, like if you really like breathe deep and focus on your breathing, it's actually like a very like pleasurable experience. I don't know. For me, I like really feel it like in my body.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I feel like sometimes it's hard for me to breathe. Like sometimes I feel like I'll even be like holding my breath and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like I have to really effort to connect. And I feel that with my daughters too, because like that is a big tool that if they're really kicked up, I'm like holding them and I'm like, okay, we're going to breathe in and you're going to hold it and we're going to breathe out, and getting them to do that. And it's really interesting is because like I've been teaching my daughters about deep breathing and conscious breathing ever since they could like understand words. And I'm just going to say this to anybody out there who have little kids. It's really interesting trying to explain to like a 2-year-old about breathing because it's not something they're aware of. They're just doing it. Mm-hmm. But what it is it's sucking through a straw, holding it and blowing bubbles. And that comes across to the kids and they could do that because telling them to breathe in and breathe out for whatever, it just like didn't register.
It didn't like connect.
Yeah, they're like, what?
Yeah.
But saying like suck in through a straw and blow some bubbles. And that can help like a little 2-3-year-old calm down. But I remember like I had to like effort to like try to figure out how to get these kids to like understand this like, concept.
Just box breathing, child.
Come on, hold 1, 2, 3, 4. No.
They're like, what are you talking about, Mom?
Yeah. So another thing that I do is, this is really interesting. This is one that I only ever really encountered the need for this year, because this year has been a lot. And sometimes when you're in a sustained level of being triggered, right? Because there's like, okay, I got triggered because of a conversation and it's like an isolated incident. And then there's like, you're going through something really hard and you're experiencing like sustained triggered state. That's hard. And like if you're losing a loved one, bigger life changing relationships ending, or losing a job or financial crisis, those can be like sustained states of being triggered. Those are so fucking exhausting.
Yeah, they are.
And I think that's important to distinguish. And I found myself in like a sustained triggered state. And one thing that truly helped me was going outside and like putting my feet in the grass. And I know people talk about grounding to the earth, right? And I know it can sound kind of like woo-woo or whatever, but honest to goodness, I was experiencing the most pain in my life. And the only thing that helped was I was literally out in my yard in my bare feet, crouched down with my feet in the grass and my hands in the grass. That's just like what my body was doing. It wasn't like I read it somewhere and somebody told me to do it. It was just like, this is literally the only thing I can think of that feels remotely good. And all I was telling myself is like, I'm here. That's all I was saying is like, I'm here. I'm here right now. I'm just here in my yard. Nothing else is happening. I'm just here. That's like how frayed out I was. And to just like come back to my body. My body is on earth. Right now, there's not any immediate threat. All the pain I'm experiencing is in my head and around me right now. But right now in this moment, I'm just here in the grass. And there's something about actually connecting to touching the grass and the earth.
Yeah.
That your body responds to. Your body starts feeling a little bit more connected.
Totally.
Yeah. Because when you think about it, like we separate ourselves. We put rubber insoles and socks and we build houses and we separate, we remove ourselves from the earth. And I think there's something about reconnecting and just touching it. That is a thing that has helped me.
I love that.
Yeah. Also doing visualizing practices. Like I'll do that with my girls. I'll tell them to like picture a really stormy ocean. And then you're starting to see the ocean calm down and it's getting stiller and more calm until it's just like glass, sparkly glass. That helps a lot because that can metaphorically bring you back to like a more calm, centered place. That works really good with my kids. And also, do you know anything about tapping?
No.
So this is something I don't know a ton about, and I actually want to research more about it, but it's essentially like you tap different parts of your body. And it's like another hack, like box breathing is. You like hack your nervous system into being more present, and it just like takes you out of that really triggered state. I'd like to learn a little bit more about it, and then maybe we could like revisit that whole idea because I think it's like really brilliant, and it's becoming more and more of like a popular, well-known practice for people to like learn about.
I feel like it's one of those ones that like I've never done it myself, but I feel like I can see how it would work. You know what I mean? You know when you hear something and you're like,
that makes sense.
How that would work.
Yeah.
I could see that like makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we use very different techniques. I was like smiling about the visualization because I'm like,
I know.
I could never do that.
I know. I love yours. Like squeeze all your muscles as hard as you possibly can.
It's so different. Like, I just like, next time I'm triggered, could you please try to get me to visualize? Because I just want to see like what happens. I may or may not like
be like all the way off with you and your fucking glassy ocean.
Like, I just was like, oh God. Mm-hmm. I hope I teach my kids that though. I think I could learn it, but I think it would be an effort.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I do love visualizations for like meditations and stuff like that. I do love it. But I think like in a really triggered place, I would just be like full blown reject that.
Like that doesn't work.
It just like wouldn't.
I think that
for
makes
me,
sense.
my blood is in my extremities. So like for me, it's all about getting some of that energy out of my body.
Right.
It's like more like about like burning it off, I feel like. Yeah. Mine is like, for me, breathing really works, especially if I'm in a situation where I'm having a conversation with someone and they're triggering me.
Mm-hmm.
If I can just think about breathing, like just taking a deep breath, but like one that's not noticeable, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I just like, if I can just bring my attention to my breathing, like that will pull me like way down. But that takes practice. Like truly, it took practice for me to get to a place where I can do it while I'm like actively having a conversation with someone. And that's the other thing is I think that like getting yourself out of a triggered state, you have two kinds, right? Like for me anyway, you have one where it's like you can take a break. You can go actually put yourself in the grass, like you're triggered. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And then you have those times where you're like in a situation that you can't necessarily like walk away from.
Unless you
like,
throw yourself out of the car. You could throw yourself out of the car into
unless
the
you
grass.
just fucking ladybird it.
Ladybird it.
Into the grass. So for me, those are like two categories, right? For me.
Definitely.
But for me, I have to first want to get out of the triggered state. I have to remind myself that I don't make good decisions in my triggered state, that I'm not creating a safe environment for the person that I love who's in front of me. And I have to remind myself that they're maybe behaving in a way from their own story and that it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with me. Like I have to like remind myself of those things to like first initiate phase one, which is desire to get out of the triggered state. And so those are just practice. It's like practice reminding myself of those things because they are true. And they're all things that I want. Like I don't want to trigger somebody else. Like I really don't. I always feel awful when I do. So step one's that for me. Step two is usually like something to do with my body energy. Like I have to like, and we talk about this in Master Your Mindset and you tease me about it, but I like love it because one thing that I do that I didn't realize I do until we made Master Your Mindset is I squeeze the muscles in my legs like as hard as I can. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I can do that like nobody's going to really know that I'm doing it. And it like burns off some energy. And it also has the like effect of like I'm focusing on my body.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
So
I'm like, so it brings me back into my body. I'm burning off energy. It's not the most like noticeable thing. I can do it in public. Cause I've like even been like sitting in a chair or something like where I'm like being triggered and I'm just like flex all the like muscles in my legs. And like hold it. It's like I'm holding it until I'm like tired. Yeah. And then I like release. And it's like maybe I do that a few times. And it helps me so much. And then also noticing my body and space. Mine is so much more physical. It's so interesting. The things that work for me. Yours are much more like in your mind.
As is our our dynamic.
As who we are.
That's how it is.
The other thing that I might do is like if I'm like in a chair, if I like can squeeze something with my hands, like squeezing with my hands and like feeling the chair underneath me, noticing where my body is in space, bringing attention to like my butt in a seat or my feet on the floor. For me, it's like all about noticing and doing things with my body. Yeah. That's the only stuff that really works for me. Visualization would feel so hard. Me. In the moment, I would probably be like, I cannot get there.
Get out of here. Yeah. I don't know. And maybe it has to do with the fight versus the flight. I don't know. I think it's just like, I love this conversation because it's really highlighting how different we all like navigate these things. And you really just have to like figure out what works for you. You know what I mean? And it's making me think that maybe I need to like with my girls, maybe like try some of those with them. Cause I do a lot of like visualization and breathing and stuff like that.
But you probably do what works for you.
But maybe I need to try some of those things with them to see if that kind of stuff works with them a little bit better. I think I'm going to do that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. One of the ones actually, because my Lila, my 8-year-old, she experiences a lot of anxiety. She's just like an anxious kid. And sometimes she can have like panic attacks. I've had to try to figure out how to manage those and work through those and get her to like come out of those. And it's like hard and it's scary. It's scary for me because I feel so bad that my little 8-year-old is like having these big feelings. And but one thing that works really well, or that has worked really well and also works really well for me, and this works really well with like anxiety, being like in an anxious triggered state and stuff like that. Again, it's like another visualization thing, but this is something that I actually learned in my IFS therapy, internal family systems, that we talked about in the Weird Way We Talk podcast. But the idea is picturing this triggered part of you. So there's like this triggered part, right? That's real kicked up, real upset, has all these fears, all the narrative, and you picture it as whatever, a ball of light or whatever you want to picture it. But you imagine it's like in you, and you imagine it separating from your body. And it's outside of your body. That creates that kind of what we've talked about, like getting that perspective, being able to like not let it overtake you, but you're separating yourself and you're saying, I see that there's part of me that's really triggered, right? And this is just like a visual representation of that. And then it's this idea of that part of you looking at it as if it's little version of you, that it's like a version of you. It's little 5-year-old Emily, little 5-year-old Sarah. With Lila, I was just saying it's a part of you, a little part of you that's scared. And that you look at that part and you say, I'm going to take care of you. And all is well.
I love
Everything's going to be all right. You're scared right now, and that's okay. And I'm going to take care of you. And that whole thing is one of like, because I remember doing that with Lila actually over Christmas. She had like a panic attack. And all my normal breathing and grounding and my normal visualizations, none of it was working. She just like kept looping back through her like triggered state. And until we like landed on that, and I like kind of walked her through that, and she like calmed down and was able to go to sleep. And the next day she came up to me and she's like, Mom, that worked really well. She was like, that one worked.
Oh, that's so good.
And I was like, oh, okay, good. And so that one worked for Lila. You might try it out. Maybe it'll work for you. Because it's the whole idea of ultimately you are the only one that can take care of yourself, right? Like at the end of the day, those hurt parts of you, a lot of times we want our partners, we want other people to like care for those parts and make those parts feel better. But at the end of the day, it's just you are the only one that can make that part feel better. And this visualization of looking at that part that's really triggered and being like, I'm going to take care of you. I've got you.
Yeah.
It just like changes the whole narrative. It's empowering. You're not being a victim. You're changing that narrative. So that visualization,
I love that one.
That one is a helpful one.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's ultimately the thing here, is to figure out what works for you. And it takes practice. Yeah. It really does.
It takes practice.
But it's so worth it.
Yeah.
So worth it.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. I love you so much.
I love you too.
This is awesome.
This is good. I feel really good about this conversation, kind of bringing it really down to like the different steps. And I hope people like are able to kind of identify and
we'll talk about it more for sure. Yeah. This is like an important one. So
yeah. Well, I love you so much.
I love you too. And I was going to say, we'd love to hear from people, their things that they do.
Yeah, your
like
tools.
Probably an endless way that people are dealing with this.
Yeah, that would be fascinating to me. I'm always looking for new ways.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, I love you.
I love you.
Bye.